Hey everybody, this is part 2 of the video series I'm doing about basically how to fly radio control aircraft. So if you haven't seen my video series, I'm kind of a nut with model aviation. Been around it since I was like 7 or 8 years old. Started in control line, ended up in radio control. Actually, I'm building a real airplane right now, an ultralight. This is a rib to my ultralight. I got all my ribs framed. I still just have to put the gussets on the other side now, but this is going to be a wing of a air bike, which is an ultralight aircraft, which is an airplane that I'm going to climb into and fly. So let's dive into this. This video is about taking off. Now, I know a lot of people will be like, you know, how hard is it to take off an airplane? First of all, I want to kind of, I want to try to say this as tactfully or politically correct as I can. There are some people that are just yank and bank pilots. They don't care if they crash. They have disposable money. They think it's funny when something gets destroyed and hey, I'm cool with that. If that's what floats your boat, rock on. But if you're a model aviator who spends a year building an airplane, or you invest, you know, $500, $1,000, $5,000 on a model aircraft, you tend to want the aircraft to have a longevity of many years of flying. So when I think of my giant scale airplanes, I have the same passion for my giant scale airplanes as I did my 70 and 80 inch airplanes if I spent 6 or 8 months building it. Now, if I spent 2 weekends building a foamy airplane and went out and flew it and crashed it, yeah, I might not care. But when you think about my giant scale airplanes, I treat them as if I do full scale. I inspect them, I do pre-flight checks, I'll do periodical maintenance on them. And I have my MSL2, which is my giant scale, very vintage airplane, the first one I built. I had over 760 flights on it before I've kind of retired it right now because I'm going to put floats on it in the next couple of years and fly it off water. But, so let's just, for sake of argument, agree all of us, we don't want to crash an airplane. And my first video was about crashing, and some people said they love to crash. Great. If you love to crash, this video is probably not for you. But let's talk about taking off an airplane. So first thing I would love you to do, and I've said this in my other video, when you're flying a model airplane, there's not ground school for that. When you learn to fly a full-scale airplane, you have a lot of ground school where they teach you basically what makes an airplane flies, the theories of aviation and all that junk. But let's just say model aviators normally buy an airplane, fly it, and they would crash it. That's the way we did it in the old days. That's how we learned. Nowadays you have simulators. And with the simulators, they will be a huge help to you. But when you go to take off an airplane, let's talk about some of the things that happen. You still have thrust on an airplane unless you're a glider. You still have to have some kind of energy to get you into the air if you're a glider. A high start, a tow, you've thrown it by hand. Some energy's got to get it into the air. You then have the drag of the airplane. You then have how much lift you've got of the airplane, and these aren't in any particular order, okay? But when you take an aircraft that is sitting on the ground without the engine running, it's sitting in a constant state. When you start to add power to it, everything's changing. Torque, basically where the engine's pulling on the fuselage with where the drag of your wheels are on the ground, there's all kinds of forces happening as you advance your throttle. Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about how to successfully take off and some things just to consider. Now, if you've got a little bitty airplane, I see people sometimes firewall them and they got so much power they leap into the air and you're on your way. But if you're not a seasoned pilot, you're putting your airplane through all kinds of instant changes and forces on it. So let's think about the airplane first that you're going to fly. Is this your first flight? If it is, it may be a test flight. Let's say it's an airplane that you bought that somebody else had. Okay, so you know it's already flown, but it's your first flight. Well, you still need to check your CG, check your trims, Make sure everything on the airplane is right. Make sure that the ailerons are moving left and right, all the common sense things. Then you need to, in your mind, think about, okay, what am I going to do in this first flight? Okay? Now that's if you bought the plane from somebody. But let's say that you built the plane completely your own design. You probably want to be a seasoned pilot if you're going to take, and I'm talking about not a foamy airplane, I'm talking about a larger balsa wood airplane or a fiberglass balsa or composite. I'm talking about, let's say you scratch build an air racer and it's got an 80-inch wing. You want to be a seasoned pilot because you don't even know if you've designed that airplane right. You know, it may not even fly and you crash it, and because of your poor pilot skills, you don't know if it was your poor pilot skills or if that plane was unflyable. Let's say it's an ARF. If you build an ARF and you build it exactly to the plans and you got the CG right in the middle of the range, okay, I've seen people like to put the CG in the front of the range, and when they go to flare to land, they run out of elevator and they hit hard and they're like, wow, that plane's hard to land. No, you had your CG too far forward. If you got it too far aft, you can get into some pitch stability problems. Normally that's not, I like to fly a very aft CG, but I have my trims dialed in perfect in my exponentials, okay? So when you are building an airplane from a kit, you could screw up the incidences. You could screw up all kinds of things. So if it's your first flight of that airplane, in your mind you need to say, this is my first test flight ever of this airplane. Forget who flew it before, forget how well it flew before if you saw somebody else flying it. Unless you bought the same radio, the same engine, and the same everything in it, and you've put your own engine in it, you put your own fuel tank or battery systems, or you've done anything in it, you could have changed the CG, you could have changed the thrust of the engine. So treat every first flight as a test flight, okay? Now let's talk about just regular, you think you're a pretty good pilot and you've got let's say a P-51, and you're really scared of it because everything you flew was tricycles. Tricycle landing gears, as you know, has one wheel up front, two wheels after the CG, and it's more like driving an RC car. Okay, a tail dragger definitely wants to get around you. Okay, so you really need to think about taxiing. And what I mean by taxiing is just going out there and driving around the field with your airplane. So think about this for a minute. As you add power with a tail dragger, the thrust naturally wants to slowly make the tail start flying before the wings have air, so the tails will want to come up. I heard a guy one time say, well, if your tail's in the air, the plane's ready to fly. Absolute lie. Absolute lie. I can give full down elevator on a tail dragger, add about half throttle, and I can lift up the tail and drive the propeller into the ground. So if the tail's in the air, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean the plane's ready to fly. But you need to do some taxiing. And then you need to do some fast taxiing. But this is dangerous. If you do fast taxiing, you can jump into the air. And the worst thing you can do is just chop your power. Because that little hop in the air might have been ground effect. It might have just been a hump in the grass. But chopping the power is going to instantly basically put you in a stall position. And if you're 2 feet in the air, that's enough to drop a wing and tear up your airplane. So if you do fast taxiing, you hop into the air. For me, I automatically just go to full throttle and take off and try to fly the airplane. Commit to taking off. Don't do hops either. I see people go down the runway, they want to fly about 6 inches off the ground and land the airplane. When you're landing an airplane, you've already mentally set that airplane up at the airspeed, the trims, and everything you need to land. When you're taking off and you all of a sudden get airborne, the best thing to do is commit to taking off. Do not try to bring the plane down unless you're a really experienced pilot. Even for me, I can get into a pilot-induced oscillation. You can do all kind of wonky things. So another thing on your takeoffs, I've never used flaps. Me personally, and I'm not going to start the argument if you need flaps or not. If you got a scale airplane and you want to have flaps, put the flaps on. But on model aircraft, flaps are pretty much useless to me from the aerodynamic sense. I've never flown a model aircraft except an EDF that the flaps really mattered a lot. And on the EDF, it helped me get enough drag that I could actually use the power for my descent to land it. Without the flaps, it just wanted to keep flying forever, okay? But if you're going to commit to taking off, learn how to track the airplane down the middle of the runway. I went to an air show, a model aviation air show called CEF, or Fly-In, I'm sorry. And one of my heroes was there, one of the greatest builders of all time, and I'm not going to mention his name, did some unbelievable stuff in the past, because I don't want to even get into an argument here. One of the greatest builders in the world can't take off to save his life. He just goes to full power, the plane turns left, and then whichever direction he's going, he takes off. He does not have any comprehension how to use the rudder. Okay? On a tricycle, when you're going down the runway to take off, your rudder doesn't have to be that effective because your nose wheel's on the ground steering you. On a tail dragger, once you get going and that tail lifts off the ground, your wheel's not on the ground. So you have to track where you're going with that rudder, which is aerodynamic. So as your speed is just starting to speed up, you may need huge rudder inputs to hold that direction down the runway. As you go faster, you'll start realizing you need less rudder because that's more air going over the rudder. So as soon as you start that taxiing, use the rudder. Learn that left stick. If you can't learn the left stick, you're going to have problems when you get into scale airplanes or anything that's got a heavier wing load, or definitely anything that's a tail dragger. Okay? So you add your power, your tail comes up, and you're realizing you're using a lot of rudder. Now me, I do it like full scale. I kind of stab the rudder a little bit left or right to hold heading. I'm not chasing it doing this. You'll see some people go down the runway and go like this. They're chasing the direction the plane's going on instead of just giving little bitty what I call burps of input to the rudder to try to keep it straight. And once you learn to track straight on the runway, you'll be so proud of yourself because when you take off, you're going right down the runway and everybody else is skidding all over the place and you're like, holy cow, you know, my airplane looks scale taking off. I don't know how many people are great builders, but they don't get enough stick time and they are horrible at taking off. Horrible. So just to kind of recap, learn the rudder, learn how that works. Now, let's say you're taking off and it's got a heavy crosswind. Most of the time, I will cheat and try to get the plane to go as much into the wind as I can. But if I'm showing off and I got to go down that runway, and my giant scale airplanes are pretty easy, you always turn your aileron into the direction the wind's coming from. Okay? That keeps your wing from wanting to lift. So if the wind's coming from this way, you're going to have stick going into the wind to keep that wing down. And I normally, before I even start to roll, I'll have almost full aileron deflection in on my giant scale airplanes. It will depend on your plane. Once my tail comes up, I will hold a lot of rudder in. Another thing is, forget where your centers of your sticks are. If you're going to be a great RC pilot, you will start ignoring where the center of your sticks are. We all, for some reason, get really comfortable of always wanting our sticks centered. I hate that our gimbals, you can feel where the center is sometimes. The reason I hate that is because if you've got a plane taking off in a crosswind, you're going to be holding a lot of rudder, you know, opposite rudder. So basically, if the wind's coming from this way, the plane's naturally going to want to weather vane into the wind. So you're holding a lot of opposite rudder to hold that line. But you're turning the aileron, so you've got a little bit of cross control going on. As soon as you get airborne and the plane, it doesn't matter that you're on the runway center line, you can let off the rudder and the aileron and let the plane crab and climb out. Okay? If you're still going to hold heading though, you're going to hold a little aileron and a little rudder in. But the thing is add power slowly. I saw a guy wipe out guys, and I haven't seen girls do it yet, but I've seen a lot of guys destroy airplanes by firewalling it. It turns, right before it goes off the runway, they pull up hard. The airplane's not flying yet. You see the wings do this. They're stalling. They're trying to fly. Rolls upside down and crashes it. Sometimes they look at their radio like, my radio went wonky. No, it wasn't. You just didn't know how to take off face the facts. If you're just going from an instant, if this plane's in a constant, and then you firewall it, the tail's going to pop up, the torque's going to take over, and you've got a bunking Bronco. If you start to add power slowly, and it starts to get crazy, pull the power back, taxi around and do it again. If you would practice literally taking off and landing a whole weekend and try to hold the center line, it will make you a better pilot. Another thing is, I will always, once I've got the plane test flown and I've got it all trimmed out, just like full scale, I will put a couple of clicks of up elevator. In a full scale airplane, I'll reach down to the trim, or if it's on the stick, and I'll give like 5 degrees of up elevator. That way, as the plane goes down the runway, it naturally wants to pitch up a little bit, and then when it's ready to fly, it just kind of takes off on its own. Now, sure, you can rotate. You can look at your airspeed indicator on a full scale airplane, and at like 65 knots, if it's like a Cherokee, rotate, climb out, and you're fine. Model aircrafts, the airspeed indicators, especially if it's got a pitot tube, is going to be making a lot of noise in your telemetry, and it'll drive you crazy. And believe me, I've tried that, and it just drove me nuts. So your tail's in the air, the plane's going fast. If you know that plane, you can tell when it gets light. And if you got a couple of clicks of up elevator, it's going to lift off, and it's going to climb out. Do not try to pull a plane off the runway early. Okay, now, if for some reason you're showing off, just make sure you understand, if your wings start to wobble, get your nose down. Okay, if the plane is not overpowered and you lift up and you see it just kind of sinking, get your nose down. Because if it's sinking, it is not producing enough lift out of those wings to keep the takeoff going. Some airplanes that have a lot of washout, they will just, and washout is where the wings, the trailing edge, is a little bit higher than the inboard, so the inboard stalls when the angle of attack is higher. You'll see some airplanes that have the little triangle things on the inboard sections that's on the leading edge. That's to make the inboard parts of the wing stall earlier, so the ailerons are still effective. So if you've got an airplane that has some type of a anti-stall device, or you've got the stuff on the leading edges on the outside portion of the wing to keep the ailerons flying, you'll see some planes take off and they'll mush. Well, if they're mushing, they're not flying. Get your nose down, get your airspeed up. Okay? Another thing is, commit to flying the airplane once it's in the air. Unless your engine dies. Okay, and I'm going to do a video on when everything goes wrong. Okay? But if you are lifting off the ground and your engine dies, the most important thing you can do instantly is push the nose down. It has to be instinct to get that nose down. I've seen full-scale videos of planes taking off, and you hear the engine start to sputter, and you see the plane start to turn, and they're trying to turn back before they're even getting their nose down. And it's an uncomfortable feeling in a full-scale airplane. If your engine sputters, the last thing you feel like you want to do is push that nose down. But if you are a competent pilot, the moment that engine starts to lose power, you're going to get that nose down and make sure that you're getting the maximum airspeed you can out of that airplane. And I'm not going to go into best glides and all of that of a full-scale airplane. I'm talking about models right now. So if you're 2, 3, 4, 5 feet in the air and your engine dies, get your nose down instantly. Okay? If you're a ducted fan or a turbine, it's not as bad because normally you've got a lot of energy already. Your gear's sucked up. Commit to flying the airplane. And, of course, never stop flying the airplane. That's one of the biggest rules in the world. Fly the wing, not the prop. If you got a 3D airplane and you're going to take off and hang on your prop, you're an experienced pilot, great. If you're a novice or somebody who's an up-and-comer trying to learn and master flying model aircraft, then fly the wing, not the prop. If you're in a big, high alpha taking off like this and your engine dies, it literally takes seconds to stall, roll inverted, and crash. Okay? Make sure you're flying the wing. Keep your airspeed up. always stay close to the field on your first couple of flights in case you do lose an engine. One thing I do want to talk about, and I'm going to try to be ending the video here, if it's a test flight, have somebody standing to your right that can grab your trims. If the plane is so out of control, it's always good to have somebody standing that can reach and help you with your trims. If you're flying a higher performance airplane, and you've taken it off and landed it 100 times, and you start to realize taking off is just kind of boring, that's when you've mastered taking off. Taking off should not be that, oh crap, I got to get it into the air. Taking off should be a process in your brain of, I pre-flighted the airplane, I've checked my trims, I haven't crashed it in a while so I don't have to check my CG, I know where the wind's coming from, I know the grass is short enough for me to take off. So you've gone through all of this in your brain. By the time you taxi out to go to take off, you should be, it should all be just a reaction to the plane's climbing, great. I'm going to enter the crosswind, great. Now I'm going to go up and play around. You should be so proficient at taking off that it's never scary. It's not nervous. I've had so many friends say, oh, every time I take that plane off, it scares me as much as landing it. You're flying probably too complex of an airplane. Go back to a trainer or go back to a sport planer. Go back to something that you can really get stick time on. Because to truly master flying RC airplanes is stick time. And I'll admit it, okay? I'm a boomer. I used to say that the simulators weren't going to be great until I met two kids that spent the whole winters on simulators, and they soloed and never crashed. And from that point on, I was like, hell yeah, everybody should have a simulator. I have a simulator, so in the winters, I still I keep kind of proficient, okay? So I'm going to close off this video now, everybody. Look, the reason I'm doing these videos is because I've had so many fans reach out to me, knock on wood, but I've literally gone 15 years without crashing any of my giant scale airplanes. 90% of that is maintenance and pre-flights, okay? And I'm going to do a whole video on power systems. And they're going to be leaning toward electric since I love electric, okay? But if you pre-flight your airplane correctly, if you do proper maintenance on your airplane, and now look, I'm not talking the little, well, this applies to everything, but there's some of you out there that like to make fun of everything, okay? You're probably that kid in the back of the room that spoiled it for everybody else. Oh, wait a minute, that was me. When I was young, people, I was a terror. But if you look at your model aircrafts as a hobby and an investment, then these videos will be good for you. If you just want to take and yank and bank and crash airplanes, these videos aren't for you. So that's pretty much it, everybody. I loved all the feedback I got from my first video. I had basically 155 positive responses and 2 people that said that they loved to crash, and the other one said it was due to dumb thumbs. I don't know if I can do a video to dumb thumbs, because dumb thumbs is your lack of flying model airplanes. Okay? If you say, oh, I had dumb thumbs, one of 2 possibilities. You were showing off and you got the plane into an unusual attitude where you just didn't know where you're at. Or the other one is you just don't have enough experience yet. Okay? So, literally, if you can't fly every day, go buy on eBay a used simulator, or go buy someplace a simulator. I mean, the amount of money we put into RC, simulators aren't that expensive. If you got dumb thumbs, educate them. It's just that easy. Thanks everybody for watching the videos. The next video I am going to do is basically on power systems. And what I'm going to do is talk about how to keep your airplane successfully flying. I'm not going to go into how to size your battery, size your ESC, size the gas engine or the glow engine. I'm going to talk about how do you successfully keep an airplane in the air for, I had 700 and I should have wrote it down. I think it's 765 flights on my MSL-1 and only had one dead stick landing in all those flights. One dead stick landing. So, and my MSL-2 now exceeded 100 flights, and I've, knock on wood, have had nothing but incredible flights with it. So the next video is going to be on power systems, and the next video after that is going to be on your radio system. Because I can't believe how many people said, yeah, my radio just quit and it flew into a tree. Knock on wood. I have never, since 1989, had a radio issue. So rock on, everybody, and have a fabulous day, and I'll see you next time.